as possible. All right, so we're here to discuss Simrit's couple. I know nothing about them, so maybe you can tell me just a little bit without going too into depth or identifiable information, and maybe just kind of what feedback or support you're looking for.
Okay.
And yeah, just as much information as you want to provide.
Okay, so they're both it's a guy and a girl. They've been dating for about like 2-ish years. They don't live together. So basically it's like communication issues. The lady is like more I guess wants to share with the guy, and the guy is more like only on days where he can take it. He wants to kind of listen, but on days where he's like tired or not feeling well or had a rough day at work, he doesn't like want to listen to it, which causes friction because she wants to share. He's not
So
meant
let me
to
just
be.
stop you there, just
Okay.
at the outset. How many sessions have you worked with them already?
2.
So you've seen them twice.
Yeah.
And sounds like a pretty classic female slash. Oops, sorry.
Sorry, I
I
couldn't
just
hear
have to
you.
disconnect my phone. Yeah,
Oh.
my phone's connected to. 1 second. Sorry. My headphones were connected to both the computer and my phone, and so if I'm getting a call, so I just disconnected it from my phone. Sorry about that.
Okay, no
So
worries.
seen them twice. Classic kind of female pursuer, male withdrawer slash, shut down, kind of keeping her at bay kind of thing as much as he can handle. Now, what did I want to ask you before we got interrupted there? Are you like working out of any particular like modality as far as couples work with those two sessions you've seen them so far?
I was trying to do EFT, but I'm still like learning about it. The first one I actually did a questionnaire with them. So I started with just getting to know like their relationship.
And you did that questionnaire with both of them in the room, or were they
So
separate?
they're online. So I did it together. And I went through like, if you didn't feel comfortable sharing or anything, we can skip questions and stuff, but they're like really open and honest with each other and me. So it went really well. They like dove right into, because I think they were seeing someone else, so they wanted
get right into it.
And
so that's good that they were open. In cases where that isn't the case, it's usually a good idea to separate them for like the intake portion or for the assessment portion, however you kind of frame it.
Okay.
And part of the benefit of that is that they have the space to speak without their partner in the room, so that, again, if they're not fully comfortable, this gives them that kind of full transparency to just kind of speak to their own truth around what's going on, like the not so good stuff in the relationship. But yeah, since they were open, then that's not an issue. But what you might find is if you were to do something like that together, some of the things they're talking about might trigger the other person, right? Usually couples are coming in either in crisis or just, their attachment figure. So anything they say out of a place of, without trying to think about the other person's feelings could be a trigger. And then you can't really do an intake session or a information gathering sort of session if they're just going to be getting triggered every moment, right? So just keep that in mind. What we usually do at No Fear and with a lot of the students, and actually regardless of whether it's a student or not, I've been doing this for about 7 years, is splitting the first session into thirds. And so we would do like 25 minutes with one of them, 25 minutes with the other, and then the last 30 minutes we'd be doing all of us together. It's usually a good enough of a length to be able to get enough in like the essential information, right? Regardless of whether you go through a formal questionnaire or not, you get a good sense with 25 minutes. It's not always enough for everyone. In cases where you need more time, what I'll usually do is, it's already been 25 minutes. It looks like it's gonna lead into a lot more than that. Like you have a lot more to say. Is it okay if today we can break up and do 45 and 45? And then that way we end up with this like, you know, equal individual, and then next time coming together. And so 95% of cases, we do 25, 25, 30. And then those 5% of cases we split. And the main benefit of ideally getting that couple session in there the first time is there isn't that gap of a week where we've opened up a can of worms, left them to their own devices, they end up with a big fight, and then they end up not coming back. And so that's what that accomplishes, is when you get to both open it up and also address something, even if it's something small, it gives them that sense, that taste of what EFT or what good couples therapy is. And then it leads that, like it creates that possibility of like, oh, look at what we can do if we come back, right? I think that's usually really important to have at least a little snippet of a takeaway from the first session, to have that experience. And then also just for yourself, like it's the worst feeling to not even get to start with a couple if you haven't really started with them, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I've been there before, and this way, if they don't end up coming back, you at least feel like you've done something, like you've had a chance to work with them, right?
Yeah, I found it like difficult because they were like they were like both in the living room and like sitting right beside each other. And I was like, and I guess they booked for only an hour. And so I was like, how am I going to do this? So that's why I did it together. And I really wish I did it separately because I could see the benefit of that.
That's right. Yeah. And so then the flip side of that is when they are there together and that's their preference, they want to come in together. We don't do the intake part, right? We just get right into EFT. And then I, at the end, give them that option and tell them the benefits of meeting individually. And then they can decide whether next time we break apart into, so like that first session, we do some EFT. Next session, if they want it, it's not mandatory. It's really just really beneficial where there is that potential of secrecy, right? Where there is one of the contraindicators like severe mental illness, bipolar, schizophrenia, something like that, or severe trauma, which is nice to be able to address individually first and build that individual alliance and understand the pacing and what they're going to be able to tolerate. And it's hard to get a real sense of that when you've got two people in the room, but you have a better sense of that when you've just got the one person. And then again, just for them to have that platform of being able to speak their mind, right, fully and feel really heard and create that individual alliance. So there's a lot of benefits, but it's not mandatory, right? You can still relay all those same things, but you just can't tease apart all the different issues in the same way that you can individually. So it's not mandatory, but it's in almost all cases very beneficial to have that. And
you
so
still
you
recommend I do this now, or it's kind of too late?
It depends, right? If you think there's a benefit for them to still do it, then sure. But yeah, it's not essential. From our point of view, the benefit of meeting individually is to get a really clear sense of who is the pursuer, how do they pursue, do they acknowledge the way in which they pursue, and vice versa. Are they able to see themselves in that role, and are they owning it, right? So there's some benefit there. And then so that they get to speak to their own side of their goals. So a pursuer just sometimes has different kinds of goals, and then a withdrawer has different kinds of goals, and that you get to see whether their goals align, and that sometimes from an individual perspective, you get to see whether they're really honest about their goals versus if they're both there in the room. Oh yeah, sure. I'm the person that goes along with it, or I'm the person that's just going to come up with the goals. I'm right. And, like I said, it's not essential, but yeah, it could still be beneficial. It's hard to say for sure if at this point, since you've seen them twice, if it's necessary. But generally speaking, if they are very open and transparent, it's not as beneficial. So it's not really that necessary. Yeah, at this point, I myself probably wouldn't. but yeah, it's a question you ask before you ever even meet them, right? So when you're on the phone with them, or like when I'm booking couples, I'll always present those benefits, whether it's for myself or I'm booking for a counselor. And
Mhm.
almost always people, unless they're like, we just don't have the budget, or we really just need to dive right in, and it's that kind of situation, almost everyone sees the benefit of meeting individually first, because it's like, even especially that first session where it's like that 25-25-30, it's you get the best of both worlds. You get to meet individually and you get to meet collectively.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
I was actually gonna mention, I find like I find the guy, he's like a little bit like condescending, I guess would maybe be the right word. And like he says things and like it's I don't know how to like kind of like take it, I guess I would say. Like
yeah,
he'll be like, oh, that's a common psychology term. Like you should know that. And I was like, I'm not
yeah,
asking like the
yeah,
definition of what you're talking about. I'm like what it means to him. So he like says those things and that's how he talks to the lady as well. And I think my question would be like, how would you like handle someone that's kind of has that kind of
yeah.
personality?
So the first thing is you really need to understand what's happening for them, and
Mhm.
to at first, like in your own head, have faith in the model that as you start digging underneath their process, you're going to
Mhm.
get to the truth of what's really going on. So
Mhm.
already the frame is, this is his personality, right? Like there's some dangerous sort of language there,
Okay.
and dangerous only in the sense that you become misaligned
Mm.
with them, right? Like already it's like, oh, you're already on her side, right? And I'm not saying you think those things necessarily, but just in the language. So
Mhm.
how you want to think about it is, again, EFT is like extremely non-pathologizing. All the things that you're describing and how he's responding, these are generally ways to cope, right? Like, so he's
Mhm.
coping in this way. So even that separation of this is who he is as a personality versus I want to understand how this fits into the cycle,
Mm.
and that sort of lens, you can see everything through. Anything that he or she are doing that is not conducive to meeting their goals fits into the cycle somehow,
Okay.
right? This would be one of those things, right? So, uh, so what it sounds like just off the bat is this is like a labeling in order to manage his own overwhelmed state,
Mm. Okay.
right? So like, and remember, because you didn't get to work with him individually, it's hard because you don't have a separate relationship
Mhm.
from her. If you had that, you would get to see him in a different light possibly.
Mhm.
But because you don't have that, all you get to see is him
Mhm.
with her in the room. So everything that he's doing, he's probably, as a withdrawer, already on edge because he's anticipating like a battle,
Mm. Okay.
right? And so really, like, whether he's projecting onto you the same thing that he would be projecting onto her, or something else is going on, this is so can you be specific, even just around like what happened, like what you said to him or what she said to him, where he responded that way?
It was basically like the terminology, emotional dumping versus emotional venting. And I was just
So
asking
you
him
you
how
presented
he,
that, or she presented that, or how did
sorry,
that look
he
like?
did. He talks about it.
Okay.
He says he says that his partner, the lady, is always emotional dumping, not emotional venting. And I asked him
Gotcha.
how he differentiates when
Ah,
she
gotcha.
emotionally venting or emotionally dumping. Like, what does that look like for him? And then he was like, oh, you should know those like terms. They're common psychology terms. And I was like, okay, like I do know those terms, but I'm asking is like, how do you know which one's which when she's telling you
Yeah,
something? And then he
yeah,
went on a tangent about something else. And I was like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah. Exactly. So that's good. It sounds like you did the right thing. Again, there's no right and wrong, but it sounds like you did the right thing. You're trying to understand his process, right?
Mhm,
And so the question is kind of like when someone challenges you,
mhm,
like what do you do in that situation, right?
mhm,
And ultimately, you're really just trying to say, look, even if I know those terms, right?
mhm,
How you're defining how you make meaning of those terms might be very different than how someone else does, or how it's defined in whatever theory that it comes from, right?
mhm,
I'm really trying to understand your experience and then bring it back to the cycle, right? And what that means when I say bring it back to the cycle is not so much just the psychoed, but you're sort of trying to um, anytime there's like an issue, you kind of want to zoom out and you want to see how does this fit into their cycle, and cycle meaning their interactional cycle. How do they impact each other, right? So I would want to be plugging this in. So if he would have said that to me, I want to understand how what you're describing right now, how she triggered this sort of labeling like process that you're going through, right? So you're labeling this as whatever, dumping or whatever it is, right? And
mhm.
I want to know, so what do you remember her doing in that particular moment, right? That a camera would see, that like that a fly on the wall would see objectively, the thing that both of you can agree to, that then you ended up hearing as emotional dumping, for example. Like what was it? What did she do exactly, right?
Okay.
Right. And because my job is I'm trying to understand how you're perceiving things. I'm trying to bring that into the open, how
Mhm,
you're perceiving what she's doing, right? How you think that to yourself, and how that feeds into the cycle so that she can get to know you better, and your underlying process better, right?
mhm.
And vice versa. We have to get underneath it, right? It's not enough to just stay up here in the labels, because often that's what we, and that's where I might bring in the psychoed a little bit. That's
Mhm,
what we call secondary. And I would say possibly some what part of what you're doing right now might be part of your secondary. And I might be wrong, but you're right now you're using these terms, and that might be part of how you cope. Would you agree that you cope by kind of slotting things in different categories, you know, as something is, what was it, dumping, and what was the other one?
Venting, emotional dumping
Right.
versus emotional venting.
Right. So one sounds like it's got this negative connotation, and one
Mhm,
sounds like it's okay. It's like a venting, it's not so bad. Whereas the dumping sounds bad, right? It's like,
mhm,
is this your way to kind of rationalize, should I hear it? Like it helps you understand what to do based
mhm,
on how you're labeling it, right? Is
mhm.
that is that what you do when things get really hard? And you always bring it up when you reflect, you always want to connect it to the other person, because that's where the power is, right? This is an attachment model. So
Mhm.
you're bringing it in. So when she says this, give me an example where you might label it emotional venting, and an example where you might label it emotional dumping, right? And is that sort of how you cope, right? And then, right, like you're always aligned when you notice coping.
Mhm.
The biggest thing to do is, it's so important to, um if even if not right away, it's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is try to get to the point where you understand why they use this as a function. And in this case, it's like, how do you validate that? Is it, you can conjecture it out, right? Like, so this whole idea of a shortcut to know what to do with it, that makes sense. It might be wrong, but even if you reflect that, he might give you the right thing. No, this is why, right? So you
Okay.
get closer to the truth, right? And another way around it is you go, oh, it sounds like, um, this one's more risky, um, but sometimes more risky is better in a sense, because you get to see him, he gets to feel more heard possibly. And
Mhm,
so why it's more risky is you're trying to go underneath it. It sounds like you might label it one of these two things, because you're kind of on guard, and this helps you kind of know whether, or primes you up for battle, right? And you go, oh, do I have to fight, or do I listen to it, right? So it's kind of the same thing, but it's like you can kind of, you're almost like trying to see it from his perspective.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, if I'm perceiving the other person as attacking me, oh, it makes sense why I would need to label it, right? And the
Mhm.
question is, at the end of the day, does this coping work, right? And they're here because it doesn't, right? And so
Mhm.
you're kind of wanting to get some acknowledgement around that. So seeing it this way, and especially in the beginning, because you're really just coming at first from a systems model of like, paint me a picture of what it looks like, right? Like, I really want to get a clear understanding so I know, how does she do the thing that then influences you to do the thing that doesn't work back for you, right?
Mhm.
It's always like you're doing the thing that comes back to you in a way that you don't want. It's not working. If it was working, you wouldn't be here. So like, walk me through how it doesn't work so I can understand and have one clear snapshot of one cycle that's not working,
Mhm.
right? Because then you can align, like, you want to align with how this coping makes sense from his perspective, right? Sometimes you end up over time getting really into the, wow, like, your childhood must have been really messed up for you to see the world as this like black and white. Either I have to see it as dumping or venting, right? Or
Mhm.
or how long have you seen this for? You don't necessarily have to go right into childhood, but how long have you seen her behavior this way
Mhm.
as like one or the other? You know, it's like,
Mhm.
well, it sounds like it makes sense if you see it as an attack, to then have this like filter to protect yourself, right? There's
Yeah, he
all
has
these different
mentioned
ways.
he mentioned that like as well, because he like a really big thing to him early. I think he mentioned in our first session was her tone of voice. So she
Mm,
said like
hmm
she's like very like loud and like out there with how she talks. And that's like the one thing he really likes about her as well. Like she's independent, she's fierce, like those are some of the qualities. But I think he's like, when she's talking to him, if her tone isn't the right tone, it triggers
hmm
him. And he said he has like anger problems and he goes into this like red zone, and when he's in the red zone he needs to like leave. And I was like, okay, that's like, you recognize that you're going into that place where you can't control yourself anymore, so you need to leave the situation. And I think the lady has a hard time understanding that, because she thinks it's always on his terms. Like if the conversation is going well, then he'll
Yeah,
stay, but if it's not going well for him,
yeah,
he's allowed to
yeah,
like leave. And I
yeah.
think
That's
that's a
very
big.
common. Yeah, the pursuer generally sees that the withdrawer is fully conscious and willing, like choosing to do the things. But in reality, their click, their thing that's like this aha moment often for them is when the withdrawer can express, no, this is not something I'm choosing to do. This is like what I do to protect myself. This is what I do to increase safety. This is like
Mhm.
what like comes over me. Once
Mhm.
they learn to express that, then it's like, oh, so it's not that like he doesn't care or that he doesn't want. It's that like the thing that I'm doing, my tone in this case, is kind of pressing a button on him inadvertently, of course, but
Mhm.
pressing a button on him. And this is his sensitivity. And once that sensitivity, or raw spot, as we like to use the term,
Mhm.
gets hit, then he just autopilots into this, I have to, turn red, protect myself, shut down, walk away, whatever it might be. And but she needs to see it, what happens underneath it, right? And the only way
Mhm.
we get there is by like slowing it down and getting him in touch with that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think they're like, one thing they were looking for is like, they were like, we need answers because I guess the previous counselor took too long or something. And so that was something I was like, it is still a slow like I'm gonna be the same, as in it's slow and it's
Yeah.
gonna take time. And they were
One
like
rule of
basically
thumb
like.
there, when someone says they need answers, what they really need often is they need new experiences, new
Mhm.
corrective experiences. That so answers come from experiences.
Okay.
Um, if you gave them answers, it wouldn't matter, right? There's,
Mhm.
type something into Google, you'll get 10 trillion answers, right?
Yeah.
So it's not the answers that we want. What it is we need new experiences, new risky experiences, risky in the sense that it's not, it doesn't come natural,
Okay.
and that we expect the bad thing to happen. But then corrective, because is that the bad thing didn't happen, the good thing happened. The thing that we didn't expect, but that we really wanted, ended up happening when we took a risk to go outside of our default. And then with your help and integrating what had just happened, that's where the answers come in. So they take a risk, they do an enactment, right? They go on a limb, they take this like leap of faith, right? With your guidance, once you get them connected to their primary experience, right? And by doing that and then seeing that their partner does the thing that reinforces that, it actually softens them. Like, so when the withdrawer does an enactment, it softens the pursuer. It actually gets them to hear them. It gets them to understand them. And that's the thing that the withdrawers need, is they need safety. And the way to build safety for them is when they can take a risk to express themselves and they're understood, right? They're not rejected for it. That makes them feel a lot more comfortable to do more of that.
Okay.
And then on the flip side, for the pursuers, right? They feel like they're always risking anyways. They're always the one communicating clearly, right? But in reality, what they think is clear, because they grew up, this is how I communicate. They don't recognize how it's like you've got primary, like soft and vulnerable, like sadness, fear, hurt, and then how they actually share is a lot more sharp and with anger. And so it's too overwhelming for the other side, because they can't see what's really there. They can't see the primary. It's distorted by the secondary way, indirect way of communicating.
Okay.
So for them, it's the challenge is actually dropping down, slowing down, being really slow and methodical and more vulnerable and connecting with that part of themselves. And it's a real challenge for them to do that, because it's a real risk that
Right, there's just someone at the door. So sorry.
Yeah.
1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
I just realized I'm still muted.
You're still
No problem. Just grab some water.
Okay.
Where'd we leave off?
You were just talking about like building safety, and then talking about the pursuer as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
doing
And so they each have their own challenges, but to short answer your question, for clients to feel like there's something substantial going on, like real change, think corrective experiences. And corrective means taking a risk at the edge of their comfort zone, right?
Okay.
So without an enactment, what really the feedback from clients, because I work with students all the time, and they're always so gun shy to have a client. They get them to like step 3 in the model, where they're feeling their feelings, they're in them, but the gun shy is, what would it be like now to turn to your partner and share that with them? And they don't end up asking. And because they don't ask, what happens is, if you were to have a few of those sessions where their partner sees them in a primary state, but they don't hear it from them, like being told from their partner to them, then it's like, I see it, but like the feedback is going to be like, yes, we keep getting somewhere, but we never or we keep covering the same ground, because we never really execute, so to speak.
Okay.
And the reason for that is, until you look at each other, turn to each other, and share what's happening, you don't get that, what we call right brain to right brain experience, where you're actually feeling like you're jumping off of a cliff, or that trust exercise where you're looking at your partner and doing that thing that's really scary. You've looked at your therapist, who you feel safe with, and they facilitated you connecting to your own primary experience. And you're able to sit with that, and they're able to help facilitate and help you stay there and kind of name what's happening in your body. But if you don't turn to your partner, you're not getting the practice of actually being able to extrapolate that out of the session, right? You've kept it in the session, right? But once you get them to turn to their partner, now you can ask them, wow, you like, and you can validate them and say, wow,
Mhm.
you just did this super, super hard thing that took some time, and that you acknowledge that this was really scary for you, but you did it. It's
Mhm.
amazing. You did it. What was that like? Now you're processing what it was like to do it, despite how scary it was,
Mhm.
right? And then there's still, you can get to find out where are they actually at. And then they go, oh yeah, like I did it. I feel really like relieved, or oh my God, I'm still super tense. I don't
Mhm.
know how it landed. I really need to hear from my partner what it was like for them, because I have
Mhm.
no idea, right? So that's what you can't do unless you get them to turn. Then you go to their partner, and then you get them to sit with their body and say, what was it like to see your partner share this with you,
Mhm.
and to debrief that part. And then if it's a good experience, which ideally if they shared vulnerably,
Mhm.
naturally it will also be a good experience for the receiving partner.
Mhm.
Then you go, what was that like for you? Can you tune into your body now around what it was like for you when they looked at you and they shared this piece with you?
Mhm.
Oh, you know what? I never knew they felt this way. Or, wow, this is so much better than how they normally share. This is what I've been waiting for forever, and blah, blah, blah. Okay,
Mhm.
good. So you feel really good, or you, whatever it is, you get them to share that back. So
Mhm.
now if they were on edge, now they feel even better. Now it's not just relief. It's like, wow, like I wish, like this is super motivating. I wish I can do this at home. Or it's like it creates that click in their brain, that potential for, what if I could do this at home? And then you can end with some psycho ed or the homework of what you want them to continue to do at home, based off of what they did in that session after you debrief, around what it is that they did do.
Okay.
Um, yeah, but that's like the shortcut, or the overview of, um, how how important it is to do enactments. Without the enactments, you're they're just gonna feel like you as the therapist did all the work, and
Mhm.
they didn't actually get to do something that you can then reinforce and say,
Mhm.
wow, you did it, and wow, your partner was able to respond so well when you did that, and how amazing does that feel, that not me or anyone else, but you made it happen by connecting to that part of yourself,
Mhm.
sharing that with your partner. That's the thing that queued up your partner to go back and be primary with you, and give you that compassion that you needed, or that reassurance that you needed in response to that. Like, can you let that in? Because
Mhm.
that's often another challenge. Is it's one thing to express, and then it's another thing to let in this different message that might actually be a huge thing for them if they, have not had the experience of letting positive messages like that in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds really cool. I'm excited to try it. Um, One thing I was gonna ask is, so with the lady, we went over like self-care for her specifically in the session. And one thing was, because we went over like he's asking for time when they're like gonna have a conversation and he's not ready. So he's like, I need time. And so she was like, what should like I be doing during that time? So we talked about, I was like, what's your self-care routine? What do you like to do for yourself? And we went over journaling, and she said she would try that. So I said, you can write down your thoughts, and then you would get a chance to reflect on them and kind of read over what you've wrote, how you're feeling about it. And then he kind of jumped in and said that he wanted her to do that, and then think about it if it was like important enough to talk to him about it, and then he could ask her if they could talk about it like the next day. um and I felt like she was really upset about that, because it was supposed to be like her kind of self-care thing, and then he just kind of jumped in. And then sometimes they go both at it, and I guess I'm asking you is like, what should I do about that situation, and B, how do I just jump in when they're both kind of talking with each other? Because sometimes on like Zoom or whatever, I feel like I'm like, hey guys, like, and they're just going at it like in person. I
Mhm.
feel like it's a bit different obviously, but
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as long as they're in the same room, it's a positive, right? It's a positive that they're giving you a glimpse into what it looks like when they're around each other and you're not there. So you
Mhm.
get to actually see in real time, without having to hear the story of what happened last week around what triggered them. You can note exactly what you noticed one of them or both of them did, and you
Mhm.
can bring that into the cycle, right? So, what you're talking about, I would try it with the EFT to stay away from talking about self-care and that kind of thing. The reason
Okay.
for that is you're in some way, not consciously, but you're in a way, for a pursuer, it's the hardest thing in the world to be told you need to back off, like you're the thing causing the issues in your partner, and that's why he needs space from you, right?
Mhm.
And it's really hard for them to pull away, because pursuers have been told that their whole life. They're told that you're too much and you're not, like these messages of like you're the issue, right? So it's the issue isn't that I think what you really wanted to hear under the withdrawer stance is it's not that he needs time, right?
Mhm.
What he needs to learn to do is he needs to learn to express what's happening when he's shut down. That's what he really needs, right?
Mhm.
And he needs her to hear him, right? And it's not that she needs coping mechanisms or grounding exercises to wait until he's ready. No, what she needs to do is she needs to learn how to express herself in a way that's soft enough for him to be able to hear what her real needs really are, right? Because it's not like any amount of time is going to fix anything. Because then you see how like that, like he jumps in and then it's like, well, yeah, you don't want to speak for his coping, because his coping is going to say, yeah, I want all the time in the world, and
Mhm.
then I'll let you know when I'm ready. But that's the trap of a withdrawer.
Mm.
They're going to say, I'm never ready, and then the pursuer comes in and pursues, right? And
Mhm.
then it triggers the withdrawer. And if they pursue in like these pursuing over the top indirect ways, which if you ask her to wait is what's going to happen, right?
Mhm.
It's not that she needs to wait, it's that she needs to learn how to um, uh, draw him in through these softer expressions. So basically you basically got lost in their cycle, right? That's basically what happened.
Mhm.
And what you actually want to do is get underneath it for both of them,
Okay.
right? You don't want to reinforce the cycle that's already happening. You
Mhm.
want to understand what's happening, and if like a car, you want to look under the hood for both of them. So be really curious about what it is that's happening, as opposed to just kind of taking his coping as the gospel and what he needs in order to feel safe. No, that's
Mhm.
what he needs to never change.
Mhm.
He's asking what he needs in order to never do anything different.
Mhm.
That's basically it, right? And it's not fair. It's not what he really wants.
Mhm.
Uh, what he really needs, which all withdrawers need, is they need to be able to express what's happening when they're overwhelmed, right? And in that, like in that moment, what's happening for them. Because if he can do that, and she can hear him, she's going to then be able to respond effectively. She's going to be able to say, "Oh my God, no, I never knew that my, when I'm pursuing you in this way, that you're
Mhm.
so overwhelmed and you feel like a rock in a hard place, and that kind of thing." And then she gets insight into what's happening for him, and he gets to see, wow, when I really drop down, she's really responsive. Like it actually is not that scary to talk to
Mhm.
her about what's going on for me, right? And it doesn't make me less of a man or weak or any of that kind of stuff, right? And vice versa. She needs to learn how to express herself when she's in that place without it scaring him, without it having him see it as an attack, and him feeling like he has to defend himself by either shutting down, running away, labeling her. These are all things to keep the other person at bay,
Mhm.
right? Like they're all reactionary,
Mhm.
right? I mean, her stuff's reactionary too, but it's in response to her perceiving he's pulling away. There's a difference, right?
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's still this like figure eight. There's no beginning. There's like always one person's behavior is then a perception of the other person that then gets them in lost in their side of the cycle.
Mm. Okay.
And you're just really trying to get curious about what that means. Um, yeah, it's easy to get lost in hearing, oh, this is what I need. Okay, well, I'll just ask them to, and then I focus on solution focused, but that's not EFT.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And then to answer your question, good, yeah, when they're fighting like that, you go at first it'll, I of course it feels like overwhelming, but what I want you to see it as is, wow, I get to see them in their natural habitat, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Record like one thing, like, so let's use what he did. So in this case, she's talking about her like grounding stuff, and then he goes, oh, you need to do that. What was it? What did you say that he did?
When he was he jumped
He
in
interrupted.
yeah,
Yeah,
when
when he
we were
jumped in.
talking about self-care. And like she was
Yeah.
like she was gonna journal like how she was feeling and stuff that day.
Yeah.
And then he was like, oh, I think you should also
Perfect. Yeah, I think you should. So that's a good one. So when someone goes, I think you should, right? He's obviously triggered. So you go, oh, thank you for letting me see that, right? And acknowledge, oh, like there's something going on for you, right? Now, and then you just go right back to the step right before of what she did. So even if you don't know what it is that she did, you can ask him, oh, so what was the last thing you remember that she just did right now that had you react in that way, right? That made you say that thing, right?
Okay.
If you really want to make it very PC and non-antagonizing. And then he'll go, oh yeah, it's when she said this. Okay, so what did you take that to mean when she said that? Oh, you took it to mean that, like, what's a withdrawer thing to mean? Like, this is just as an example. So you took it to mean that she's like overwhelming you, right? Like, or that she's like too much, right? And so, okay, so this thing she said, like, he doesn't care about me or something like that, right? So you took that to mean that, oh, you're a screw up, like she's saying about him, you're a screw up. And then, okay, so you take that to mean you're a screw up. What do you think to yourself when you think you're a screw up, or that when your partner that you love so much that you're trying to make happy, is telling you, your partner of 2 years is telling you you're a screw up? Not that you're saying, you look at her, not that you're saying that, but that's how he's perceiving it. What's that? What do you tell yourself when you think, oh, I think I'm a failure and like I'll never make her happy? Wow. What's that like to think that you'll never make her happy? Now you're getting closer to the, oh, and so no wonder so how do you cope with that? You go, you should do blah, 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 blah. So this is how you cope. You tell her what she should do, right? But really underneath it all, this is the softer emotions that are in there.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's where it's so much easier and quicker to get to those primary emotions when it's live in the room.
Okay.
Because you can go very quickly from coping to primary, right? They say, the opposite of hate is not love, right? The opposite is actually indifference. Because they're on the same wavelength. You can go straight from anger to love, like in a second, the moment you feel understood, right? And so it's like, as long as you're in that emotional wavelength, as soon as you go, what's that like? Like, what's happening right now? And you see maybe they squirm with their coping, and then you go, well, what's it like to think this, right? Like, once you get to that core like thought, that's relative to what it is that he's perceiving about her, and then like, what's the thought to yourself about that? That's like a softer thought. Instantly, it's like, it's not a big leap because you're not thinking about yesterday. It's like there's emotion right now in the room, and it's very quickly to convert that into the primary emotion, right? Because of how important the other person is, that those emotions are usually right at the tip of their tongue.
Yeah. And I can see them, like the first session they were together in the same room, and then the second session they were separate. But I could see when he would say, he said things like she's always dumping on me, that then I'll always think of our relationship as like a negative thing. And I could see like her body language changing, like just the way she was sitting and like her facial expressions changing. So I think that'd be really good to get underneath, because he
Exactly.
says it, but I guess
Yeah.
I'm not reading more into it. Like I should be getting more into
You're reading it, but you're not following it. You're
Yeah.
not pursuing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the most important thing, is to see it.
Mhm.
And then you can go and pay. What is that like for you, like for her, to have him say, you always dump on me?
Mhm.
Like you could go, I saw your face change. Something happened when he said that, right? And
Mhm.
then of course he might interrupt and here and that, and then that's okay. You just go, like, we're just going to spend a few moments with her. Trust me, it'll all be worth it once we get underneath it, right? Once
Okay.
you do it enough times, they'll less likely to interrupt, because the benefit outweighs the needing to say the thing in the moment,
Mhm.
because you'll get underneath it and they'll see it, right? They'll start to trust you around like the payoff.
Yeah. And she even says it too. She'll be like, let her talk. Like, you're not letting her talk. And he's like, I'm trying to explain. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's been a couple times where she's understood what I was saying. And he's like, it's something. He's like, no, she means this. And then I'm like, well, I'll just tell you how I was trying to say it. And then I try to be like that. So yeah, I'm excited for their
Yeah,
next mission.
good. Yeah, and that goes to show, like, he probably can't control it. So sometimes when that antsy person really
Mhm.
needs to get the thing out, you can again collaborate with their coping in a sense. Try to understand like what's happening, that they feel like they can't hold on and wait for the other person to respond, right? And yeah, it's like you can think of it as like disarming, right? You want to disarm the coping, because until you do that, they're just going to keep like badgering, right?
Mhm.
Like the other, like you trying to connect to the other person. And
Okay.
so yeah, but once you get underneath it, then, or once you neutralize it, disarm it, then they feel heard. Then it's important to be able to give them some instruction, like, hey, we're going to be spending, just preloading, we're going to be spending some time with your partner. I know it's going to be tough, but just trust me, it won't take too long. I might, and then you still have to notice with your peripheral vision, like, oh,
Mhm.
this is really hard for him. So anytime you notice him squirming, go, oh, you're doing really great, things like this, to just, it's only going to be another couple of minutes, trust me. And then,
Mhm.
yeah, you'll get more efficient over time in getting her down to her experiential level. And
Okay.
then once she shares, none of that stuff that he wanted to interrupt with before will matter, because he'll actually be able to see what's really going on for her.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Pansy, anything that came up for you, or any kind of comments or questions that you wanted to have addressed at all?
No, not really. I just had a thought when I was about keeping it on track, is when I used to teach when I was in South America. I was teaching English as a second language, and I was asking the director what to do when the person is starting to say all sorts of racist comments and everything. I said, what do I do? And he said, make sure they're correct their grammar.
Yeah.
So
The
make
parallel to
sure
that with EFT of keeping
the
things on
swears.
track is listening to the music. So uh like with your example of the grammar, with EFT, the music is what you're listening for, and the music is of emotions. So Sue will always harp on this. You've got the steps, the dance, which is super important. It's the cycle, but the music is what you're listening for. So Simrit, when you were talking about, you know, like when you see on her face, her looking down, these nonverbals, this is the music. This is the most important thing that you want to follow. Everything else ultimately is content, and it's noise in the signal. And what you're looking for is, where is the sweet, sweet music that you're trying to bring to the surface?
Okay.
And there's a lot of information, right? There's so much you can pay attention
Mm-hmm.
to. And there a lot of it ends up just being distraction. And if you can cut through it and just get to the music and open up the music and expand the music and make that super front and center, everyone listens to the music once it's clear enough.
Mm.
So once you get them to feel it and you can feel it in the room with them,
Mm-hmm.
everyone will listen to it.
Okay. Awesome.
It's the noise of the secondary and the coping and the name calling and the labeling. And it's really like maybe tempting in a way, or like, oh, like I have to pay attention to it because it's loud.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the music. So yeah, as you work with it, you'll get better and better at just listening to the music.
Okay.
And even when you can't hear the music, you have the model to fall back on, and the faith that, like, if I facilitate in at least one person at a time
Mm-hmm.
their music coming out, then everyone will listen as soon as that music becomes clear enough.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because everyone's goal is the same, right? Like everyone wants to de-escalate,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means also to understand what's going on for both sides. They all want that, right? But the only thing that will get there is when one person goes and stands up and goes, yeah, I'm willing to take the risk to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
That's the how. The how is in your facilitation of allowing their primary to come to the surface. And once it's there, then everything fades, right? Like you can feel it in the room, and you can see the other person is now very, very much like diligently watching and like, what's going on? This is important.
Mm-hmm.
Once it's there.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, good luck, and let me know how it goes.
I will. Thanks.
All
Bye,
right,
everyone.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.